My aunt smiled when the lawyer announced there was nothing left for me. Not a polite smile, not a sympathetic smile, a victory smile, the kind of smile someone wears when they believe they've finally won. Then she leaned across the table and whispered, "Grandma knew exactly who deserved her inheritance." I remember everyone hearing it. I remember nobody correcting her. And I remember feeling something break inside me. Because my grandmother had practically raised me. She taught me how to cook. She taught me how to ride a bicycle. She taught me how to survive heartbreak. For 26 years, she was the most important person in my life. Yet somehow, according to my aunt, Grandma had decided I deserved nothing. Not her house, not her savings, not even the antique locket she'd promised me since childhood. Nothing. For 3 months, that story spread through the family. My aunt repeated it constantly. Grandma changed her mind. Grandma was disappointed. Grandma knew who cared about her. And eventually, everyone believed it. Even me. Then a lawyer opened a hidden envelope. An envelope nobody knew existed. Not my aunt, not my cousins, not even the people handling the estate. Across the front, written in Grandma's handwriting, were 6 simple words. Open only if Emily is absent. The room went silent. Because I wasn't absent. I was sitting right there. And whatever Grandma had hidden inside that envelope, my aunt clearly wasn't supposed to see it first. By the time the letter was finished, the woman who spent months telling everyone I meant nothing to Grandma couldn't look anyone in the eye. But to understand why that envelope changed everything, you need to understand how my aunt convinced an entire family that Grandma had forgotten me. My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old, and my grandmother was my best friend. Not because we were related, because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. There is a difference. Growing up, Grandma lived only 15 minutes away, close enough for spontaneous visits, close enough for Sunday dinners, close enough to become part of everyday life. My parents worked long hours, which meant I spent countless afternoons at Grandma's house, homework at her kitchen table, movies in her living room, cookies cooling on the counter, the smell of cinnamon everywhere. Those are some of my happiest memories. Grandma had a gift for making ordinary days feel important. Nothing ever felt rushed around her. Nothing ever felt insignificant. When I was 8 years old, I told her I wanted to become a writer. Most adults smiled politely. Grandma bought me a notebook. A real notebook. Leather cover, gold pages. Then she said, "Dreams become real when someone takes them seriously." I never forgot that. And neither did she. Years later, she still asked about every story I wrote. Every single one. My Aunt Carol was different. Very different. Carol was Grandma's oldest daughter, my mother's older sister. And if Grandma was warmth, Carol was calculation. She wasn't cruel, at least not openly. She simply viewed everything as a competition, attention, success, recognition, even family relationships, especially family relationships. As a child, I didn't notice. As an adult, I couldn't ignore it. Whenever Grandma praised me, Carol found a reason to dismiss it. Whenever Grandma spent time with me, Carol joked about favoritism. Whenever Grandma gave me advice, Carol rolled her eyes. Small things, tiny things, but constant things. The kind of behavior that slowly reveals who someone really is. Still, Grandma always defended her. "That's just Carol." The same sentence everyone used. The same sentence that excused everything. For years, life continued normally. Birthday dinners, holiday gatherings, weekend visits. Then Grandma got sick. At first, nobody thought it was serious. Some fatigue, a few medical appointments, several tests. Nothing alarming, until the diagnosis arrived. Then everything changed. Suddenly there were treatments, doctors, hospitals, schedules, fear, lots of fear. Grandma handled it better than anyone else. She remained positive, determined, stubborn, especially stubborn. But illness changes families. It reveals strengths and weaknesses. People become who they really are when life becomes difficult. I visited constantly, whenever work allowed, whenever Grandma wanted company, sometimes just to sit beside her and talk, sometimes just to listen. Those visits became precious, because neither of us knew how many remained. Then something strange started happening. Carol began controlling access. Not officially, not openly, subtly, very subtly. Grandma's tired today. Maybe visit next week. She needs rest. Reasonable explanations. Perfectly reasonable. Until they started happening every week. Then every phone call. Then every visit. Soon it felt like every conversation passed through Carol first, and every request required her approval. The first time it bothered me was Grandma's birthday. I called. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Eventually Carol answered. She's sleeping. I frowned. It's noon. A pause. Then, she's had a difficult morning. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Because Grandma always answered my birthday calls. Always. For 26 years. Without exception. Later that evening, my phone rang. Grandma. The moment I answered, she sounded confused. Why didn't you call today? My stomach dropped. Because I had. 3 times. And suddenly I realized something. Someone wasn't telling the truth. I just didn't know how serious that truth would become, or how far Carol was willing to go. Because over the next year, she would slowly convince relatives that I had stopped visiting, that I had become distant, that Grandma felt abandoned. And by the time Grandma died, most of the family would believe it. Grandma's illness worsened gradually, not all at once, not dramatically, just enough that each month felt a little harder than the last. More appointments, more medications, more days spent resting, more uncertainty. The kind of uncertainty families never talk about openly, but everyone feels, especially Grandma. Despite everything, she remained positive, at least around other people. When we were alone, she was more honest, not hopeless, just realistic. One afternoon, we sat together on her porch, watching the rain, neither of us speaking much. Then she quietly said, "People start acting differently when they think time is running out." I remember laughing. That's a strange thing to say. Grandma smiled sadly. You'll understand later. At the time, I didn't. A few months later, I did. Because Carol's behavior changed. Subtly at first, then noticeably, then constantly. Whenever relatives called, Carol answered. Whenever appointments were scheduled, Carol managed them. Whenever information was shared, it came through Carol. She became the gatekeeper, the filter, the messenger, and eventually, the storyteller. The first major argument happened during Thanksgiving. I planned to spend the entire weekend with Grandma. I arranged time off, booked everything. Then 2 days before the trip, Carol called. Don't come. I frowned. What do you mean? Mom isn't feeling well. I'll ask her myself. A pause. Then, she's sleeping. Something felt wrong immediately, because Carol didn't sound concerned. She sounded annoyed. I ignored her and drove there anyway. When Grandma opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised. Not upset. Surprised. Emily? I smiled. Of course. Grandma frowned. I thought you canceled. My stomach dropped. Because I never canceled. Not even considered it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Grandma's expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. Enough to tell me she understood exactly what happened. And enough to tell me she didn't like it. That evening, after Carol left the room, Grandma squeezed my hand, then quietly whispered, "Always verify things yourself." I looked at her, confused. She simply nodded, as if she had already said too much. The months passed, and the stories kept growing. Relatives began making strange comments I'd never heard before. Emily doesn't visit much anymore. You're so busy these days. Carol says work always comes first. Every sentence sounded innocent, harmless, reasonable, and every sentence carried the same message, a message I never actually said. At first I corrected people, then I stopped, because there were too many conversations, too many misunderstandings, too many assumptions. One family barbecue changed everything. I arrived late because of work, only 20 minutes late. Yet the moment I walked in, I felt it. The atmosphere, the looks, the awkward smiles. Something had changed. Then Aunt Linda approached me. She looked sympathetic, almost pitying. "How are you holding up?" I frowned. "Fine." She hesitated, then said, "I know things have been difficult between you and Grandma." The words hit me like a punch. "What?" Aunt Linda looked surprised, genuinely surprised, as though she expected me to agree. "Carol said you've been growing apart." Growing apart. The phrase echoed in my head, because it was completely false. Grandma and I talked almost every day, yet somehow people believed otherwise. That night I called Grandma, immediately. The moment she answered, I asked, "Do you think we're growing apart?" Silence. Then Grandma laughed, actually laughed. "Who told you that nonsense?" Relief flooded through me, instantly, because her reaction was genuine, not forced, not polite, genuine. Then her tone became serious. "Emily." "Yes?" Another pause, longer this time. Then she quietly said, "Not everyone who speaks for me is speaking the truth." The sentence stayed with me, for weeks, months, because deep down, I knew exactly who she meant. But I still didn't understand how far Carol would go, or how much damage had already been done, because while I was trying to protect my relationship with Grandma, Carol was building a completely different story, a story she planned to tell the entire family after Grandma died. And when that day finally came, most of them would believe every word. Grandma died on a Thursday morning. The call came at 6:12 a.m. I knew before I answered. Somehow I already knew. My phone rang. I saw Carol's name, and my heart sank. The moment I picked up, she was crying, or at least trying to sound like she was. "Mom passed away this morning." The words hit me like a truck. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. Because no matter how prepared you think you are, you're never prepared. Not really. I drove to Grandma's house immediately. The entire trip felt unreal. Every mile hurt. Every memory hurt. Everything hurt. When I arrived, relatives were already gathering. Neighbors, friends, family members, people Grandma had known for decades. The house felt different, quieter, empty, like something important had disappeared. Because it had. Grandma was gone, and nothing would ever feel the same again. At first, Carol seemed supportive. She hugged me. She cried. She talked about how hard everything was. For a few hours, I thought we were grieving together. Then I started noticing things, strange things. People stopping conversations when I entered rooms, relatives giving me sympathetic looks, whispers, lots of whispers. The same feeling I'd experienced months earlier, the feeling that everyone knew something I didn't. The funeral took place 4 days later. Hundreds of people attended. Grandma had touched a lot of lives, and seeing so many people there should have been comforting. Instead, it felt strange. Because by then, Carol's story was already spreading. I just didn't know how far. After the service, relatives gathered at the reception hall. People shared memories, cried, laughed, remembered. Then Carol stood up, tapped her glass, and asked for everyone's attention. The room gradually became quiet. I assumed she wanted to thank everyone for coming. Instead, she started talking about Grandma's final months, about sacrifice, about loyalty, about who had been there. Then she said something that made several people glance at me. Mom learned a lot about people near the end. The room became uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, because everyone understood what she meant, and Carol knew it. She absolutely knew it. Then she added, "In the end, she made decisions based on who truly showed up." Again, she never said my name. She didn't need to. The implication was obvious and devastating. That evening, relatives approached me with awkward sympathy, the kind people offer when they think something unfortunate happened to you. One cousin even said, "I'm sorry things ended the way they did." I stared at him. What way? His expression immediately changed, because he realized I had no idea what he was talking about, none. The next few days were worse, much worse. The rumors spread quickly. According to Carol, Grandma had been disappointed. According to Carol, we had grown apart. According to Carol, Grandma had changed her estate plans. According to Carol, I shouldn't expect much. Each version sounded slightly different, but they all ended the same way. Grandma had chosen Carol, not me, not the granddaughter she practically raised. Carol. 1 week later, I returned to Grandma's house. I wanted a few keepsakes, photographs, recipes, the old notebook Grandma bought me when I was 8. Nothing expensive, nothing valuable, just memories. Carol met me at the front door and immediately crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" The question stunned me. "What do you mean?" She sighed dramatically. "The estate hasn't been settled." "I'm not asking for the estate." I pointed toward the bookshelf. "I just want Grandma's notebook." Carol shook her head. No, no, just like that. No explanation, no discussion, just no." I stared at her in disbelief. For the first time in my life, Grandma's house didn't feel like home. It felt like territory, and Carol was guarding it. 2 weeks later, invitations arrived. A formal meeting with Grandma's attorney, the estate review, the will reading, the moment everyone had been talking about, the moment Carol seemed oddly confident about, very confident. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, Carol was already there, smiling, relaxed, almost cheerful. Several relatives sat beside her. My cousins sat beside her. Everyone seemed to assume they already knew the outcome. Then Carol made her biggest mistake. She leaned toward me, close enough that only I could hear, and whispered, "Try not to take it personally." I frowned. "What?" She smiled, that same smug smile, the one I'd seen my entire life. Then she quietly said, "Grandma knew exactly who deserved her inheritance." My stomach dropped. Because Carol wasn't guessing. She wasn't speculating. She genuinely believed she had already won. What she didn't know was that the lawyer had discovered something unusual that morning, something hidden, something Grandma specifically instructed him to reveal under certain circumstances. A sealed envelope, an envelope nobody knew existed, and written across the front, in Grandma's own handwriting, were 6 words that would change everything. "Open only if Emily is absent." The lawyer stared at the envelope, then looked directly at me. Because I wasn't absent. I was sitting right there. And suddenly everyone in the room realized something. Grandma had prepared for a possibility that made Carol's confidence disappear instantly. Because whatever was inside that envelope, Grandma never intended Carol to control it. The conference room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Attorney David Reynolds stared at the envelope, then at me, then back at the envelope. For the first time all morning, Carol looked nervous, very nervous. The confidence she'd worn like armor was beginning to crack. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, then carefully cleared his throat. "Before we review the estate documents, there is something unusual we need to address." Every eye turned toward him, every eye except Carol's. She couldn't stop staring at the envelope, almost as if she recognized it, or feared it. The lawyer continued. "This envelope was discovered inside a sealed file provided by your grandmother." The room remained silent. She instructed that it be opened only if Emily was absent during the estate meeting. A cousin frowned. "But Emily is here." The lawyer nodded. "Exactly." The room became even quieter, because suddenly everyone understood. Grandma expected something serious, something important enough to prepare for. The lawyer carefully turned the envelope over. There was another note written on the back, a note nobody had seen. He read it aloud. "If Emily is present, open this immediately." The room froze. Carol's face lost color. Immediately. Because whatever was inside, Grandma wanted me to hear it. Personally. The lawyer slowly opened the seal. Inside was a folded letter, several pages long, written entirely in Grandma's handwriting. The moment I saw it, tears filled my eyes, because I recognized the blue ink, the careful cursive, the little loops she always added to certain letters. It was unmistakably hers. Attorney Reynolds unfolded the pages, then began reading. To my family. The room fell silent. If this letter is being read, then I am no longer able to speak for myself. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. That concerns me. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. The lawyer continued. Not because I fear death, but because I know how easily stories change when the person who lived them is gone. The room grew still, painfully still, because everyone suddenly remembered Carol's version of events, the version they'd heard for months. Grandma continued. I have heard conversations about Emily. My heart stopped. And some of those conversations are not true. Across the table, Carol shifted uncomfortably, the first visible sign of panic. The lawyer continued reading. Emily never abandoned me. The room froze. Absolute silence. She never stopped visiting. She never stopped calling. She never stopped loving me. A cousin slowly looked toward Carol, then another, because those words directly contradicted everything they'd been told. Everything. The lawyer continued. If anyone claims otherwise, he paused, then read the next line. They are speaking for themselves, not for me. Carol stared at the table, unable to look up, unable to meet anyone's eyes, because Grandma had just destroyed months of rumors in 4 sentences. Then came the next page, and things became worse. Much worse. For the past year, I have kept notes. The room instantly became alert. Notes? What notes? The lawyer reached into the envelope again and removed a small stack of papers. Dozens of them, neatly organized, dated, signed. Grandma's personal records. The lawyer examined the first page, then read aloud. March 4th. Carol told relatives Emily hadn't visited in months. The room became silent. The lawyer flipped the page. Emily visited yesterday. A shocked whisper spread across the room. Then another page. May 17th. Carol told me Emily forgot my appointment. The lawyer continued. Emily scheduled the appointment herself. More silence. More uncomfortable silence. Then another. July 22nd. Carol claimed Emily never calls. Emily called twice today. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Because a pattern was emerging. A very clear pattern. A pattern Grandma had documented herself. Then came the page marked with a red ribbon. The lawyer paused, looked down, then slowly read. I believe Carol is trying to create distance between Emily and the rest of the family. A collective gasp filled the room, because those weren't assumptions. They weren't accusations. They were Grandma's own words, written privately, long before anyone expected them to be read. Then came the final page in the envelope, a page titled, Regarding My Estate. The room instantly grew tense, because now everyone understood. This wasn't just about rumors anymore, this was about inheritance. The thing Carol had been so confident about, the thing she claimed was already settled, the thing she seemed certain she controlled. The lawyer looked at the page, then at Carol, then back at the page, and for the first time all morning, Carol looked genuinely afraid. Because whatever Grandma wrote next, she had spent months hoping nobody would ever see it. The room was silent, painfully silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Attorney Reynolds stared at the page titled, Regarding My Estate. Across the table, Carol sat frozen. For months, she had acted like everything was already decided, like Grandma's wishes were obvious, like the inheritance belonged to her. Now she looked terrified, because for the first time, she wasn't controlling the story. Grandma was. The lawyer adjusted the page, then began reading. If this letter is being read, then I suspect there may be confusion regarding my estate. Several relatives exchanged glances. Confusion. That was one way to describe it. The lawyer continued. To prevent misunderstandings, I want my intentions stated clearly. The room grew still. No person has authority to speak on my behalf after my death. A few relatives slowly looked toward Carol. The message was obvious. Grandma wasn't leaving room for interpretation. Not anymore. Then came the next line. Especially regarding Emily. My throat tightened. The lawyer continued. If anyone claims I stopped loving Emily, that statement is false. Silence. If anyone claims Emily disappointed me, that statement is false. Another silence. If anyone claims Emily was excluded from my estate, the room froze. The lawyer lowered his voice. That statement is false. A collective gasp spread through the room, because Carol had spent months saying exactly that. Months. The lawyer turned the page, then continued. My granddaughter Emily has been one of the greatest joys of my life. Tears filled my eyes immediately. She never stopped showing up. She never stopped caring. And she never stopped being family. Nobody spoke. Because nobody could. Grandma's words carried more weight than months of rumors, more weight than assumptions, more weight than gossip. Then came the inheritance instructions, the section everyone had been waiting for, the section Carol clearly feared. The lawyer began reading. My house shall be sold. Carol blinked. Several relatives looked surprised, because everyone assumed Carol would inherit it. Apparently, Grandma had other plans. The proceeds shall be divided equally among my grandchildren. The room exploded into whispers. Not children, not daughters, grandchildren, equally, every grandchild, including me, especially me. Carol looked stunned. The lawyer continued. My savings accounts shall be distributed according to the attached schedule. He opened another document, reviewed it briefly, then smiled, a very small smile, because now he understood. Grandma had thought of everything. Emily shall receive the antique locket promised to her during childhood. I immediately started crying, because I remembered that promise. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting beside Grandma, listening as she told me the locket belonged to my great-grandmother, and one day, it would belong to me. She remembered, even at the end. Then came the sentence that changed everything. In addition, Emily shall receive the contents of box 17. The room became quiet. Nobody knew what box 17 was, except the lawyer. He immediately stood, walked toward a storage cabinet, and returned carrying a small wooden chest, old, locked, labeled box 17. Carol's face went white, completely white. The lawyer set it on the table, then removed a key attached to the estate documents. The lock clicked open. Everyone leaned forward, waiting, watching. The lid slowly lifted. Inside were photographs, letters, cards, dozens of them, hundreds, years of them. The lawyer carefully examined the first letter, then looked at me. These are yours. I frowned. What are they? The lawyer handed me the stack. I opened the first envelope, immediately recognized my handwriting, then another, and another. My birthday cards, my letters, my photographs, everything I had ever sent Grandma. Everything. The room fell silent, because suddenly everyone understood. Grandma kept them, all of them, for years. Every card, every letter, every photograph, every memory, carefully preserved, carefully protected, like treasures. Then the lawyer found one final note inside the box, a handwritten note, addressed to the family. He unfolded it and began reading. If you are looking through this box, then you now understand something important. The room remained silent. People do not save what they do not value. Tears streamed down my face. Every letter in this box came from Emily. Every card, every photograph, every memory. Nobody looked at Carol anymore. Nobody needed to. Because Grandma had already answered the question Carol spent months trying to control. Who mattered to Grandma? The box answered it, the letters answered it, the envelope answered it, and there was still one final page left to read, a page titled, To Carol. The moment Attorney Reynolds read the title, Carol stopped breathing. Because whatever Grandma wrote on that final page, it was meant specifically for her. And judging by the expression on the lawyer's face, it was going to change everything. The room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Attorney Reynolds stared at the final page, the page titled, To Carol. Across the table, Carol sat frozen. The confidence was gone. The certainty was gone. For the first time since Grandma died, she looked afraid. The lawyer unfolded the page, then began reading. Carol. The room became still. If this letter is being read, then I suspect things have unfolded exactly as I feared. Carol lowered her eyes, unable to look up, unable to look at anyone. The lawyer continued. I love you. Several relatives looked surprised, because they expected anger, expected punishment, expected condemnation. Instead, Grandma began with love, just as she always had. Then came the next sentence. But loving someone does not mean ignoring the truth. The room froze. For the last several years, I watched you turn family relationships into competitions. Nobody moved. I watched you compare affection, compare attention, compare importance. And I watched you treat Emily as though she were your rival instead of your niece. Carol closed her eyes, because there was no denying it. Not anymore. The lawyer continued. Emily was never competing with you. She was simply loving her grandmother. Silence. Heavy silence. Then came the sentence that changed everything. And I believe you knew that. A cousin slowly looked toward Carol, then another, then another. Nobody spoke, because nobody needed to. Grandma's words said enough. Then came the final section. The section written entirely in underlined handwriting. Grandma's final request. Carol, I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking you to be honest. The lawyer paused, then continued. After my death, do not rewrite my story. Carol's shoulders slumped. Do not decide who I loved. Do not decide who mattered. And do not speak for me. The room remained silent, because for months, that was exactly what she had done. Then came Grandma's final sentence to her daughter. The truth does not belong to the loudest person in the room. The lawyer lowered the page. Nobody spoke. For nearly a full minute. Then Carol started crying. Not quietly, not politely. She broke. Completely. Years of control. Years of competition. Years of resentment. All of it seemed to collapse at once. Finally, she looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in months. And quietly said, I'm sorry. The room held its breath. Because nobody expected it. Least of all me. Carol wiped her eyes, then continued. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad. More tears. I kept telling myself I was protecting Mom. She shook her head. But I wasn't. Nobody interrupted. Nobody argued. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about truth. And truth had already won. Eventually, the estate meeting ended. The inheritance was distributed exactly as Grandma instructed. Fairly, clearly. No confusion, no manipulation, no rumors, just her wishes. A few weeks later, I received the antique locket. The same locket Grandma promised me as a child. The same one I'd admired for years. I sat alone in my apartment and opened it. Inside was a tiny folded note. A note nobody knew existed. Not even the lawyer. Not even Carol. Just Grandma. With shaking hands, I unfolded it. 3 simple lines. Emily, never let someone else's version of you become your truth. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Then the final line. Love, Grandma. I cried harder than I had at the funeral, because suddenly I understood. The envelope, the letters, the box, the journal, the inheritance. None of those things were the real gift. The real gift was certainty. The certainty that Grandma knew me, the certainty that she loved me, and the certainty that nobody would ever be allowed to rewrite that relationship after she was gone. Months later, I visited her grave. The sun was setting. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. I placed fresh flowers beside her headstone, then sat there for a long time, thinking, remembering, smiling. Eventually, I took the locket from my pocket, held it tightly, and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the inheritance, not for the letters, not for proving anyone wrong, for protecting the truth. The same truth she protected her entire life. That love isn't measured by proximity, or money, or who talks the loudest. It's measured by consistency, by kindness, by showing up, again and again, even when nobody is keeping score."